勇ましくめた一人の男が今日も行く真面目に遊ばぬ奴らには体で覚えさせるぞセガタサンシロセガタサンシロセガサタンシロトヤ
Hello and welcome back to Replay Retro, where I was just about to make a metaphor about freshly squeezed retro oranges, but I've decided to drop that theme before it takes off. I'm Matt, and on this week's show we look to an early 90s system to see how Sega tried to get the jump on Sony, and we find out why the 4th generation victors couldn't keep the lead as the 5th generation of video game consoles got underway. At the start of the 90s, Sega were at the top of their game. The Mega Drive had taken the gaming world by storm, pushing arch-rivals Nintendo into a very close second place. However, Sega's desire to stay ahead of the competition had led them into dangerous waters, as they attempted to extend the lifespan of their console. The release of the Mega CD and 32X add-on units had not been successful, and had proven a very costly experience, confusing many gamers and irritating developers. While Nintendo, on the other hand, had simply let things play out, slowly but surely regaining their lead with the Super Nintendo. Sega decided that the only way forward was to clear the fog and launch an entirely new system. The company now focused all its attention on Project Aurora, which they had been working on quietly, even before the 32X hit the market. Gamers first heard about this system during the launch of the 3DO, as Sega boldly claimed they had something far more powerful coming in the near future. This announcement alone may be responsible for killing any chance of success the 32X ever had, as it's difficult to see why anyone would buy the add-on, knowing that a new system was hot on its heels. Nevertheless, the boast was true, as the Saturn was certainly a very powerful machine for its time, featuring 2 Hitachi Super H series 32-bit processors, 2 video chips, and an impressive Yamaha synth chip to handle sound. However, this complicated setup led to developers struggling to program games for the system, and a lack of decent development support tools only exacerbated this problem, meaning very few programmers could get anywhere close to using the system's full power, with many choosing to just use one of the system's processors, or less of its more complex chips to make things easier. While on the less powerful PlayStation, not only were games easier to program, but also better development tools were in place, making life far simpler for developers who managed to squeeze more from the PlayStation despite its technical inferiority to the Saturn. Even porting games to the Saturn was more difficult, with titles like Duke Nukem 3D requiring their whole game engine to be modified for the system. Regardless of these developer concerns, Sega went ahead and launched the Saturn in Japan in 1994, just 4 weeks before the PlayStation, and a whole 2 years before the N64, giving the system a head start on what Sega saw as its main competition. In the West, the late 1995 release was brought forward suddenly in an announcement at E3 to the first half of the year, in a move designed to throw Sony off and give Sega the advantage. However, this backfired massively, as just moments later Sony would announce that the PlayStation would be around 25% cheaper than the Saturn at launch. Not only this, but many retailers were angered by Sega's decision to hide the new release date from them, and therefore decided to limit the new console's shelf space, with many deciding not to sell the Sega hardware at all. As if this wasn't bad enough, Sega had also burned the developers, who had games scheduled for the original launch day release, to ride with the initial momentum of the console, and who would now be late to this launch party. Because of this, the Saturn launched with a lineup of just Sega-developed titles, such as Virtua Fighter 1, which cleverly used 1 CPU per character, making the game run quickly and showing off the system's real-time 3D capabilities. However, the game lacked textures, and it wasn't long before PlayStation games such as Toshinden, with their impressive textures, lighting effects and translucent clothing layers, made the Saturn look like it was a whole generation behind. And while it would eventually recover with impressively textured 3D games, its reputation was already irreparably damaged, and gamers perceived the system as a 2D machine. Regardless of this perception though, the Saturn did have some great games, and we'll take a look at a few of those right after we've seen the hardware itself. Okay, so here we are with the Sega Saturn hardware. As you can see, it's a very simple machine, no real major design elements to it, just a nice simple matte black box with a glossy panel at the front here. On that glossy panel, you simply find your power button, your reset button, a power light and access light for obviously indicating when the drive is being accessed, and an open button which opens the top loading drive, which is a 2x JVC CD-ROM drive. You of course get the Sega Saturn logo and text and Sega logos as you'd expect. Towards the rear here you see this cartridge flap. Now this isn't for games, this is for either using with a RAM cartridge for improving the quality of certain arcade titles like King of Fighters, or a ROM cartridge for extra memory, so basically a memory card. Those memory cards look like this. They do look a lot like game cartridges and are of course way bigger than the PlayStation 1 memory cards. They slot into the back there and press down, and you now have increased ROM storage space on the console. On the front you have the two controller ports for player 1 and 2. There were multi-taps available, including a 10-player adapter I believe for Bomberman. These controller ports aren't something I've seen before. I haven't seen them on any other system, so I believe they are unique to the Saturn. Very smooth, unlike the usual wiggling that you had with, say, the Mega Drive controllers. So I would say that these control ports are definitely a good upgrade. The sides, as you'd expect, not a lot going on there, just venting. Same with the underneath really, just a few warning labels and some more venting. On the back, serial numbers, all that kind of stuff, as you'd expect. Power connector, that's just a standard 2-pin kettle lead. An AV connector for obviously connecting to your TV. And a communication connector. Now I believe this was for the internet connection equipment, or maybe for connecting two consoles together, but I'm not entirely sure on that. So as usual, if anyone knows for definite, comments box. Over on this side, if we open this flap, we reveal the memory battery. Is a standard CR2032, just like you see in PCs and various other pieces of equipment, including the later Dreamcast's VMU. Also, here you'll see a slot. That slot is for the expansion card for MPEG video. So plugging in an expansion card there enabled the system to play MPEG videos. Again, pushing towards those media features of the system. Popping that down for a second, you'll see there are two controller varieties. This is the controller that was originally released in Japan and wasn't planned to be released over here or in the US. It's a nice slinky controller, it fits into the hand very nicely. 6 buttons, start button, D-pad and 2 shoulder buttons. You also get the media control buttons, I don't know if you can make those out, but you've got obviously skip back and skip forward. Looks like repeat, stop, play and pause. You get a nice long bit of flex, and then once again that unique connector which simply goes into the control port there. Okay, the controller we did get over here at first was this one. Sega felt that gamers in the West had larger hands and would therefore benefit from a larger controller. Where they did their research, I'm not entirely sure, but you know, okay. It's still a nice controller. I definitely prefer this one, but you still get all the same buttons. The D-pad to me, however, isn't quite as good. You don't get the media logos anywhere, and I find the shoulder buttons to be a little unsure. You don't feel like you've pressed them. I mean, there is a click, as you can hear, but you don't feel like you've pressed them as much as you do with the definite button action on those ones. Soon after the Western launch, Sega did discover that gamers weren't entirely happy with this controller, and so they did release this one to be available separately. That's why obviously I've got one, because I definitely preferred that when it came out. The games come in these cases, which look very similar to DVD cases, but are actually a little bit taller and a bit thinner. They have a cardboard outer bit, which obviously has your printing on it. So in this case, Sega Rally Championship, screenshots, the usual guff. When you open them up, you see that there are these two plastic trays, which have let go of the disc and the instruction manual. These two plastic trays which are attached to the cardboard. Now, a common problem with these cases is that the glue holding the plastic onto the card fails. It just gets old, and so the plastic trays become loose, and obviously then your case is kind of wrecked. It can be repaired really, really easily, but it's something that you will probably find when you look at buying Saturn games. In one side then, of course, you get the instruction manual. Nice thick instruction manual in a variety of languages there. And then the disc, which is a simple CD. Of course, you simply open the top loader, put the disc in, close, press the power on, and you're ready to play Sega Rally Championship on your Sega Saturn. Okay, so first up then we have
Sega Rally Championship.
Now, to me, this has always been the definitive arcade racer, and this game was the reason I wanted a Saturn. The idea of being able to play this at home was just amazing. Most of you will of course know this game from the arcades. There are still plenty of arcades that have it. It's that much of a classic. To me, no arcade racer surpasses this. This is what arcade racing should be.
3, 2, 1, go!
Now, I remember getting this and thinking how amazing it was that the graphics looked so close to the arcade. They're not quite there, but they are as near as damn it. And the sound as well. I think the sound to this game is very good. The music, the soundtrack to it, is really brilliant. And some of the individual effects are great. When I let off the throttle, there will be a little bit of turbo dither. There you go. As you would get in reality. It's little effects like that being added that really completed the experience. However, it would look like my skills in the game have waned somewhat.
Very long, easy right, baby.
The reason I think this is such a definitive arcade racing game is that it's not too complicated, it forgives you very easily, but at the same time, you are punished for your mistakes and that you lose time, but you're not so heavily punished that you've lost 30 seconds to your car spinning. And when combined with the arcade race wheel, which I also have, this game just becomes wow. I remember I always used to hit that, just in front of the puddle, I always used to hit that wall.
Very long, easy right, baby.
Yeah, I know you're impressed by that drift. Try not to send too much fan mail.
Easy right. Easy left. Easy right.
Anyone who hasn't played this game,
Over jump.
when you do crawl out from under your rock, make sure you do. This is a must-have game. This is one of those games that everyone who calls himself a gamer should play at some point in their life. And I can't believe I made such a stupid mistake there.
Over jump. Easy left. Easy left. Easy right. Wow.
Ah. But yeah, you get the general idea. This is definitely, like I say, pick up this game if you haven't already played it. And if you ever see it in an arcade, challenge everyone to it. Oh, I'd forgotten about the helicopter. There you go. Look at those graphics, that's just beautiful. What happened to game over game? You can of course check your replays. That's what I wanted. Here is of course another game that you'll all be familiar with, but perhaps not on the Saturn. Of course, this is Tomb Raider. The first time we ever saw the well-endowed Miss Croft in action. Chose just the gym area here so I can just have a quick look.
Ah, the main hall. Sorry about the crates. I'm having some things put into storage and the delivery people haven't been yet.
Skills. Looking at this now...
And while still
Oh,
pressing
sorry, Miss
forward,
Croft.
press action and I'll vault up onto it.
No, you're alright. Obviously by today's standards, this does look very blocky and very clunky, but this is a major step forward from what anything we had on the Mega Drive or the Super Nintendo. You have to remember that.
This used to be the ballroom. I don't actually run everywhere. When I want to be careful, I walk.
Shut up, Croft.
Hold down the walk
Shut
button
up. You...
and walk
Shut up,
the
shut up,
right
shut up,
line.
shut up.
If I do a running jump, I can make a jump like that, no problem.
Personally, I do think this looks better on the PlayStation. And that's probably once again down to the very
Let's
complex
go for a swim.
programming required to make the Saturn
The jump
work.
button and the directions move me around underwater.
Love the water sound effect. I do think the sound is better on the Saturn.
Just use forward and left and right to manoeuvre around on the surface. Press jump to dive down for another swim about, or go to the edge and press action to climb out.
It would have been interesting to see what the second or third Tomb Raiders looked like on the Saturn, if Core had of course decided to make them on it rather than abandoning Sega and just going for the PlayStation, which was a pity really in my opinion. But yeah, that's Tomb Raider.
Right, now I'd better take off these wet clothes.
Oh yeah, gigoogity. This last game then is Grid Run, and this is one of my personal favourites for the Saturn. It's a very simple game, but I love it. The aim of the game is to capture all the flags before your opponent can. Whoever captures the first flag is in control, and there you go, if you get caught by the other person you become unable to capture flags anymore. To assist you in capturing flags you of course have this weapon. You also have the ability to speed up, the ability to lay platforms, the ability to randomly teleport, and the ability to deploy mines. These other pickups help you in the bonus stage. There you go. Managed to capture all the flags. And as you can see, there are these booster panels on the floor. I can't believe I let him get it first. There you go. So as I say, only one person can capture flags at once. This is a brilliant game. Made a big mistake there. It's a very addictive game. I've got quite a lot of magic. You can see the meter on the left is my magic, how much magic I have available to me. Different spells use different amounts of magic. Can't believe I keep doing that. Sucker! Oh, I miss. One more flag to get. Oh, I can't believe I missed that. What am I doing? There we go. Brilliant game, and you can play it 2-player as well. It's a fantastic game when played in 2-player. Oh, bad. Graphically, this game may not be too impressive, although the backgrounds are quite cool, and this mist that floats over people is relatively new, but mostly I think this shows what the console could do when it was using a slightly more 2D game. I know there's still an isometric almost experience here, but mainly I'd class this as 2D. Sorry, I'm really struggling to talk because it's a brilliant game and I'm now addicted. Yeah, that's enough of that. Back to the studio! By the end of 1995, gamers were rapidly choosing the PlayStation as their console of choice, thanks to its growing library of big-name games, and the false perception that it was in fact the more powerful of the two, leaving the Saturn languishing in second place. However, all was not lost, as the Saturn had become the last stronghold for small independent game studios such as Game Arts, whose games like Gun Griffin drove the system to great success in Japan, where Sega managed to sell more than 5.5 million consoles. That's as many as the US and Europe sold combined. Seeing this popularity, as well as the system's impressive 2D capabilities, SNK brought their popular beat-em-ups to the system like King of Fighters, which utilised a special RAM cartridge in the backup port to make them smoother and more arcade perfect than their PlayStation counterparts. Sadly, in the West, however, gamers had simply lost interest in the Saturn. Sony's marketing was smashing Sega and making the PlayStation an almost iconic success, even managing to prevent the 1996 launch of the N64 from dethroning their first ever console. Sega immediately dropped down into third place behind Nintendo and watched as studios abandoned their one-time console giant one at a time. Core, for example, made Tomb Raider 2 a PlayStation exclusive, ignoring the game's starting life on the Saturn. Other key franchises like Wipeout and Destruction Derby soon followed suit. Sega tried falling back on the console's media capabilities with photo software and a video cartridge, as well as internet services, but this too was ignored, and by the end of 1997 Sega announced that they were developing a new console, the Dreamcast, to replace the Saturn, effectively killing off any remaining interest from consumers and developers, just as the Saturn had done to the 32X just a few years earlier. In the coming years, Sony and Nintendo both implemented various cost-cutting measures on their consoles to lower the price and sell more units, but the complex layout of the Saturn meant that Sega couldn't join them, and instead just bundled in popular games such as Virtua Cop in an attempt to sell their remaining stocks. Console production was discontinued in the West in 1998, while in Japan production continued for 2 more years as independent developers and beat-em-up fans helped maintain the console just a little while longer. Sega never truly recovered from this slump. The impressive Dreamcast was marred by the company's heavily battered reputation, turning developers such as EA away, proving that it's not always about having the best hardware, nor is it even about having the best games sometimes. It's about how you treat your customers, and Sega's customers were all out of faith. That's all we've got time for in this week's show, but join me again next time for another system review, and don't forget to keep in touch with the show via our Twitter page. I'll see you next time on Replay Retro.